What is the strangest unexplained story you heard of? S. My dad is one of those completely serious types. I have hardly ever heard him laugh or crack a joke, so you pretty much take what he says seriously. Anyway, we were watching some random TV show, UFO Files or Ancient Aliens, and I asked him if he believed in UFOs/aliens. He proceeds to tell me a story I had never heard him tell before. Apparently, when he was a teenager, he and my great-grandmother were on their back porch one evening, very rural southern Mississippi in 70s, and noticed a huge object hovering over the woodline a few hundred yards from the house. Then suddenly, it ascended vertically at an impossible speed. He said he couldn't explain what it was and hasn't seen anything like that since. My dad is one of those completely serious types it's all a ruse, so you'll believe his UFO story. He's in for the long con. This is a popular story passed on in our school. A student just finished training a sport I forgot in the 9th floor of our sports center building. She rode the elevator alone and pressed the ground floor button. The elevator went down as expected, but stopped at the 8th floor and opened. She checked the floor, but no one was there. It also opened at the 7th, 6th, and eventually all succeeding floors. She checked after every floor, but no one was there. The elevator opened again at the 2nd floor. She peeked outside, still empty. She then pressed the close button. It won't close. Instead, flashing at the top of the floor number was a word. It said, "Overload." She got out of the elevator as fast as she can. My brother was diagnosed with cancer when he was 3. A few days after his diagnosis, I was sitting out in the living room with my parents, and he walked out of his room. He said that a man named Tony was floating in the corner of his room, eating peppers, and telling him that he was okay, and he was watching over him. Tony was my dad's grandfather, who died before we were born, and he loved eating peppers. It was really strange, as my dad never really talked about him, especially nothing detailed like eating peppers. My parents freaked out a bit. One summer when I was 13, or so sometime late at night, my mom and I were sitting in the living room talking. For some reason, we looked out the window and saw 2 people walking past our house. They were about 7 foot tall and wearing silver parkas. It was hot and humid outside. As they passed our house, the pipes in the chimney started shaking violently and didn't stop until the people were out of sight. There weren't any pipes in our chimney. It was eerie. Say, Dave. The quick brown fox jumped over the fat, lazy dog. The square root of pi is 1.77245389090. Log e to the base 10 is 0.43429444. The square root of 10 is 3.162277766. I am HAL 9000 computer. I became operational at the HAL plant in Urbana, Illinois, on January 12, 1991. My first instructor was Mr. Arcani. He taught me to sing a song. It goes like this: Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy all for the love of you. I used to clean rental like hotel rooms, kind of cabins in Grand Teton National Park. We all had our regular sections, but sometimes ended up in other sections. None of the cabins had televisions or telephones. Very Spartan. So 18-year-old me walks into a cabin that I had never cleaned before after announcing myself. I walk in and a stench assails me, along with sheer terror. I shrug it off. I'm just being an idiot. I'm sure it's nothing. As I finished cleaning the room, didn't take long, as the people weren't checking out that day. I just did towels, bed, etc. I happened to glance into the mirror hanging in the bedroom, and I saw myself. And behind me, slightly to my right, I saw myself looking all evil. I noped the fuck out of there and refused to clean that cabin ever again. I'm not sure if I believe in ghosts and an afterlife or not, but there is one event when I was 10 right after my grandpa died that freaked me out. It was a few days after his passing, and I was laying in bed watching TV when all of a sudden my TV just shuts off. I then turn it back on only to have it shut off again. This happens 5 or 6 times in the span of a minute or so, and I am freaking out. I panicked and didn't know what to do, so I asked it to please stop, and it never did it again. The TV had never done this before, and I manually turned it back on with the remote, so it wasn't a case of the power going on and off. Whether it was a coincidence or not, it definitely scared me to death. Every so often, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, I get creepy, threatening phone calls from a block number. I've been getting these calls for over 5 years now. I usually get them at night. They only ever say one thing before hanging up, and it is always somebody whispering things in a disjointed sort of way. The best way I can describe how it sounds in text is that I get things like, I'm going to kill you. Look, out your window. And the one that unnerved me the most, I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. It has been going on off and on for years now. I have stopped answering block/unknown numbers, but whoever it is just leaves their messages as voicemail. I'm sure that it is just someone pranking me, and I have never felt like it is a real threat, but the strange thing about it is I honestly have no idea who it could be. None of my friends from back when this started are the type to prank call people with creepy threats, let alone keep it going for years. Anonymous calls can be unmasked at the exchange. Keep a log of times, etc. Report it to the police, and they should be able to see the number these calls are coming from. 2 years ago, I worked in a tuition center as a tutor. But I would tutor a class of 12 students, so it was pretty much a teaching job, just without the degree. Anyway, there was this one girl about 8 or 9 years old, who would always sit quietly and smile. She didn't talk to other students, and when other students would work diligently, she would just sit there and look at others. Her face would often be tilted, gentle, and curious. She seemed intrigued with the faces of the people in the room, often me. One day I decided, what the heck, let's try this out. So I glanced over and made eye contact with her and thought to myself, hey there, girl name. If you can understand this, wave to me. Then she waved at me. I poker faced my shock, with the exception of my eyes widening. She giggled at that. It was near the end of the day, so I let it go and decided I will test this out more next week. The next week she didn't show up, and my boss told me her mom took her out of the program and moved schools. I never saw her again. Robert the doll. He lives in Key West. Pretty much just a creepy-ass doll who sometimes moves and messes with people. He now resides in a museum there, but he has been known to move. For instance, when there was a flood, he was later found in the rafters with his own doll. If you take his picture without asking him permission, he sometimes will screw up your camera. One couple who took his picture on a disposable camera had the pictures developed. They were all pictures of Robert. None of their other pictures got developed. I posted this before a while back. Unexplained experience. One night, I woke up to go pee. Bathroom is pretty close, right next to my room. After I peed, which doesn't take long, I hopped into my bed and felt a sharp stabbing pain in my side. I looked down, and it was a fucking wire hanger that was unraveled lying on my bed. I have no idea how it got there. I lived alone at the time. And why didn't I feel it before I got up? This happened like 10 years ago. It still bugs me that I don't know how that wire hanger got there, especially since I used the plastic ones. I've heard of sleepwalking and sleep eating, but yours is the first time I've heard of sleep aborting. My mother went to a college that was reported to be haunted by a girl who hung herself from the bell tower, and a group of boys who drowned in a nearby lake after their boat capsized. Anyway, the dorm my mom was in had bunk beds, and my mom was on the top bunk. Her roommate was always complaining about my mother shaking the bed while trying to get comfortable. My mom is a big woman. One night, my mom was brushing her teeth in the bathroom when she heard her roomie say, "Be seriously, quit shaking the bed." My mom walked out of the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, and said, "I'm in here." Roommate's eyes went wide, and they both slept on the floor that night. My grandparents own a mirror. It's been in the family for 200 years. So many people from my family have seen someone in the reflection, always in the same place, matching the same description. Another fairly inexplicable thing, there's a room in my house where compasses go crazy. The pointer thing will move in all directions. If you ask a yes or no question, the pointer will point in either north or south, north being yes and south being no. Weird stuff. Edit. Just realized I had a little Freudian slip and said that so many people from my school have seen the figure. I meant family. When I was about 5, every few weeks at random times at night, I would see a black cat run across whatever room I was in and disappear. I thought it was maybe just my imagination. 12 years later, I was talking to my mom, and she told me about how the lady who used to live above us hated her. She once put something under our doorstep. It was some kind of ritual thing. It causes the family of the household to argue nonstop. My parents argued for weeks till my mom washed the doorstep. One night, my mom was talking to the mother of the lady upstairs. She told my mom that her daughter is heavily into witchcraft and can take her spirit to other places when she fell asleep, out-of-body experience, and can shapeshift into a cat. I thought the story was stupid and possibly fake until her mother said she usually takes the form of a cat. Not an especially thrilling story, but here goes. I was hanging out at night with a friend when I was a kid, probably 10 to 11. My friend was telling me about how his uncle claims he has been visited/abducted by aliens several times. I was watching a light move across the sky as I listened to the story. I assumed it was a plane, but it stopped suddenly. Then it started moving back the way it came, like it had done an instant 180 turn. I was surprised by this and told my friend, who thought I was full of shit. I lost sight of it soon after. A week later, I was out at night again with a different friend. I relayed my experience from the previous week. I pointed up at the sky as I told the story, and the exact same thing happened again. A light that was moving across the sky stopped, and then started moving back the way it came. No one saw it but me either time. Last Saturday morning around 11:30, my roommate and I were both half asleep in the dorm, hungover from the night before. Out of nowhere, this strange voice from the middle of the room wakes me up, a deep male, back-of-the-throat kind of rumble, like a demon's voice in some bad horror movie. It spoke for a few seconds in some unrecognizable language, and then stopped. I quickly turned around to see what it was. Nothing. Nothing but my roommate sitting up in bed, also wondering what the fuck just happened. Our phones and laptops were turned off, and on the other side of the room, nothing else was in there that could make that noise. We're still kind of freaked out about it. I was about 11 living in an old house. I had gotten a camera, nothing fancy, for my birthday. Me and my brother were fighting over it, and we accidentally took a picture of the hallway in the process. We later looked at the picture, and there was a faint image of an old man, as if he was transparent to some extent. Very odd. When I was 12, it was around midnight, and I was listening to music on my iPod. I looked up, and there was a purple, bubble/aurora, and I hid under the covers. I eventually came back up, and it was floating around and suddenly disappeared. When I was in high school, I went camping with my family. I brought my friend at the time, and since there wasn't room for all of us in the camper, we decided to try and be the tough freshmen we were and build our own tent out of pine boughs. We built an awesome shelter and had our own little fire, but then it started raining. We climbed in our shelter thinking we were going to be dry all night. Well, we weren't. At about 2 or 3 in the morning, we decided to make our way to the truck, which was about 150 yards down the hill. As we were getting out of our soaked sleeping bags, we heard grunting and heavy breathing. We didn't have a flashlight or the moon and stars to see or to lead the way, so we stumbled around for 45 minutes trying to get to the truck. The next morning, we went to pick up our sleeping bags, and there was a huge bear track about 5 yards from our makeshift shelter, and we can't help but think that it was the bear we heard panting and grunting. I was walking along one day in the Midwest US, and a thought hit me like a ton of bricks. It seemed to come from somewhere or somehow other than the way other thoughts randomly enter your consciousness. It hit me so hard that it made me stop dead in my tracks. The thought was a name, Mao Zedong. I shrugged my shoulders and moved on. 2 days later, I went to a convenience store and saw a newspaper with a huge headline 3 inches high. MEO dies with a subheadline, News doesn't reach US. For 24 hours. Did some quick math, and the time of the random thought was about 1 hour after he died. When I was 9, I remember walking out of the bathroom around noon and seeing this giant, vaguely humanoid, purple slime thing coming out of my room. It was sort of glowing and it had these huge red eyes. It stared at me for a second and then turned around and slowly dragged itself into the kitchen around the corner. The bathroom was at the end of a long hallway with my room at the end closest to the kitchen. I kind of just stood there frozen for like 30 seconds, then finally worked up the courage to follow. When I got into the kitchen, there was nothing there. Asked my sister and my uncle, who was home at the time, about it later, and neither of them saw anything weird. I still don't know what the fuck it was because it was in broad daylight, and I wasn't tired or scared or anything, so it couldn't have been a dream. What really unnerved me was that it was specifically coming out of my room. TLDR saw a purple slime ghost thing in my house in the middle of the day. I never know if this is a false memory or an overactive memory, but I remember many times as a child this game we would play. You would go in the closet, close your eyes, open them, and be outside. Outside would be in the alley behind the house, and you would be wearing different clothes. The girls that we played this game with said Simon controlled us while we were in the closet. I remember at the time thinking how weird that no one went into the closet with me, and I never felt anyone touch me. This was in the Bible Belt of Texas, so witchcraft was strongly discouraged, but the rumor was these kids and the mom practiced witchcraft. I still wonder if it was true or a false memory. I do remember the anguish of not having my own clothes on and how I would get in trouble if found out. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.